How you doing, YouTube? Welcome to the Rubin Report. I am Dave Rubin, and I have with me Nikki DeLoach and Cara Santa Maria, and we got a lot of crazy stories for you. So let's get right to it. There is either an Ebola outbreak that will end human society, or not that big of a deal happening right now. It depends who you're listening to. So we wanted to break down some facts for you. So right now in Western Africa, they are having the worst Ebola outbreak that they've ever had. There have been about 930 deaths and about 1,700 cases. And this is going on in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Nigeria. And we've got some more info for you. The disease spreads via bodily fluids, so it is not airborne. We got to just put that out there right now, because that's what a lot of people are afraid of. The death count has grown to 887 as of August 4th, so I was just giving you the updated numbers with a total of about 1,600 likely diagnosed victims. So far, the fatality rate from this outbreak has been about 60%, which could rise to about 90%. And right now, there is no vaccine for Ebola, though the World Health Organization reports that there are several being tested. And let's look at a timeline of what's going on here. The first Ebola epidemic was in 1976, and the disease killed 280 people, which was 88% of the people who became infected. Okay, so now let's bring this back to America for a second. So we had two doctors over there that were treating people with Ebola, and they got infected with Ebola. They are now in Atlanta at the CDC, and they are quarantined, so we'll see what happens with that. People have been freaking out. Donald Trump, who I get all my information from, he was on Twitter freaking out about why are we bringing these people back. Again, it is not airborne, but I don't have any great faith in the government that they're not going to somehow screw this up and make it airborne. Who knows? We will see. But before we get into all the specifics, let's just look at a little info on what Ebola actually does. Okay, so symptoms typically begin 4 to 9 days after exposure, though the incubation period could last for up to 21 days. The first couple days, days 1 through 3, you have flu-like symptoms and profound weakness. Days 4 through 7, patients may also have vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, low blood pressure, headaches, and anemia. Days 7 through 10, toward the end of the illness, there's confusion and bleeding, both internal and visible. All of this progresses toward coma, shock, and death. Okay. So pretty bad stuff. Cara, you clean up all the science messes that I create. So I'm not even going to give you a question. I'm just going to let you talk.
A little bit of cleanup mode.
Yes.
So first and foremost, the earliest outbreak ever of Ebola was in Central Africa. Obviously, physicians had never seen Ebola, so they weren't sure how to contain it. That's why the death toll was as high as it was, and that's why the actual rate of people dying versus people getting infected was nearly 90%. Now, that is the number that a lot of people are citing now. Ebola, has a 90% death rate. But what we're seeing in West Africa now is actually closer to 60%. What we would see in America if Ebola took hold here would be significantly lower, because we have significantly better health practices than we're seeing in those regions. So that's number one to remember. A lot of people are really, really afraid of these two physicians coming over to, they're actually in an Emory hospital.
All right, so I think the thing was built by the CDC, but they're at Emory Hospital.
CDC's like right next door. So they've got a lot of CDC influence there. There is very, very, very minimal risk of anybody else getting infected. These individuals are heavily quarantined. There are so many safeguards being taken. Ebola is very easily killed by disinfectants. Cleaning up after an individual is a very easy way to prevent transmission of the disease. It's actually quite hard to catch. One way that a lot of physicians will tell you to think about Ebola is think about it like HIV. So you can catch HIV from transmission of bodily fluids, from blood, from semen, from saliva if there's blood in the saliva. It's very hard to catch HIV by shaking somebody's hand, by sitting on the same train as them. Ebola is very similar in that way. So I think that's a really important thing for people to realize that they don't often.
Yeah. So why aren't people talking about that?
That was pretty much what I was just going to ask you. So I wanted you to clean it up, and then that was what I was going to say to you, is I wanted to do this segment because this isn't what people are talking about. If you turn on the news, pandemic, freak out, everything.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what the news has trained us to do. So what is the deal? Is this just the nature of the news? It's 24-hour news cycle. We got to freak people out at all costs.
Yeah, I think it's so they can keep watching.
Yeah.
Why? Like if they thought, oh, well, all is well, they're going to turn their televisions off and then just go about their day.
Yeah.
So, they want to sit in front of it. They want to see like the craziness ensue and they want to keep people watching. So they don't tell us that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
I think one thing also that's important to remember is that, 1,600 people is an outbreak. Like, this is dangerous, but Ebola is not what you read in Hot Zone.
It's not what I saw on Outbreak.
It's not Outbreak or Contagion.
Or Contagion.
I'm literally like Rene Russo. I was like, should I go get a suit? And
but you know what? It didn't work out that well for Rene Russo.
It really didn't. She died in the end.
And here's the thing. If you were an aid worker in West Africa, in Sierra Leone, in Nigeria, or not Nigeria. In Nigeria, there's only one case, and it's not even a confirmed Ebola case, or maybe it's two. But that was the big initial fears, that it spread to Nigeria, which is actually a large populated country in the capital there. But Sierra Leone and Guinea, and where else is it in West Africa?
Liberia.
Exactly. These are less populated areas. The reason that you see this huge jump between 1976 and now is that they are more urbanized. More people can get on planes. So there are people who have access to moving around Africa that they didn't have before. And also, distrust of Western medicine has spiked in West Africa. And what we're seeing is that the aid workers are going in and they're saying, you may be infected. They're taking family members away, and the family members are coming back in body bags. And this is very frightening to these individuals. Also, it's customary in Africa that in death rituals, they actually wash the bodies. And this is a really easy way to transmit the disease. And so a lot of people are catching it, and they're not listening to the council that says, you cannot come in contact with the infected. It's the only way to stop the spread.
Right. So you've given us a lot of the heavy lifting here. I, of course, watched the first episode of The Strain last night, which didn't help my paranoia at all, because that's pretty much all it's about. So, all right, now that we've gotten sort of the factual part of it, so let's go with the fun jump part of it, which is the contagion part and the outbreak part. Do you think one day that stuff is eventually going to end up here? Like those movies, I loved both of those movies.
Right.
I mean, do you think that's sort of, not with this specifically, but it could somehow become airborne,
It could be
right?
a form of terrorism in a way. If somebody wanted to do that, they could use it as a form of terrorism. I wanted to ask, like, I had heard that there is a serum that is working, because they're saying that there's no vaccine, but now they do have a serum that seems to be working. They shipped it over to Africa. What is that?
Well, here's the issue here. There are a lot of treatments that are in the works that we know might work on organisms that aren't human. We can have an Ebola, a type of Ebola in a pig or in a monkey, and then we're going to try and treat it. And there have been really big strides that have been made in the lab. Unfortunately, this is a big sticking point for a lot of people, because if we do go into these countries and we do try a treatment that ends up either failing or that ends up having some sort of horrible side effect, that distrust is going to spike even more. And so what we know now is the best way to treat Ebola is to quarantine the victims. The victims may die, they may not, depending on how strong their immune systems are, but if you quarantine them, you won't see any more spread of the disease. That's the #1 thing to do. As far as a pandemic, an epidemic that could take out
give me something for my science
before.
fiction. Yeah.
We've seen it with bubonic plague, we've seen it with Spanish flu, we've seen like horrible, horrible diseases that we didn't understand at that point, that we didn't know how to contain. And I don't think it's that unlikely a scenario that something like that could happen. Of course, medicine has grown leaps and bounds. There's a really good book by David Quammen called Spillover that's all about this, and I recommend it to anybody who reads still. Pick that book up.
There's probably an audiobook.
But I would say that my bigger fear, I agree with
terrorism.
you, would be weaponizing certain types of diseases in order to make them difficult to treat and in order to make them heavily transmissible.
Yeah.
It would be engineered.
So, all right, so last thought on this, I'll let you finish up, is how much can we pay attention to this stuff then? You know what I mean? Like, you can worry about the specifics of this, and then you can worry about the terror angle or all that. How much brain power are you giving this stuff on a day-to-day basis?
I think I just check in daily, check the news, kind of like, click on things, and I think that's all you can do. You just kind of like educate yourself and then don't freak out about it. I mean, that's what they want you to do. They want you to live in and still instill fear in you so that you freak out and you keep watching the news all day long. And it's, no, just like educate yourself and move on and let the fear go.
All right, well, yeah.
Don't listen to Donald Trump.
Oh,
Just don't listen to him.
That's a general theme.
In general.
Yeah, in general.
Don't listen to Donald Trump.
Don't listen to Donald Trump. All right, well, I hope we did a little bit of what Nikki just said right there so that you got some facts and maybe you won't be freaking out, but you know a little something and you can do a little more research. And Kara, you get a gold star.
Yay, Kara!
There you go. Round of applause for Kara. All right, let's move on. So it seems to me that there is some really, really bad stuff going on in the world that nobody is talking about. So ISIS, which is the Islamic State in Syria, they're also known as ISIL, which is the Islamic State in the Levant, and now they're just being called IS, Islamic State. They have been going on a rampage basically through Iraq. Iraq really is no longer a country in any way that we think countries operate. Syria, of course, is in the worst civil war going on in the world right now, and about 170,000 people have been killed. So we're going to show you an extremely, extremely graphic video. So there's your warning. This is horrible what we're about to show you, but I'm bringing this up because nobody's talking about this. And I'm shocked and I really don't understand why. So again, warning, this is extremely graphic.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أعز جنده وأنجز وعده وهزم الأحزاب وحده إخوانكم جنود الدولة الإسلامية أتمنى الله عليه بفضل من عنده ونصر أن فتح عليهم الفرقة 17 بنصر من الله ومنا نبرأ إلى الله من حولنا وقوتنا ونبرأ إلى الله من عدتنا وعتادنا فاليوم وإلى قيام الساعة لا حول لنا ولا قوة طواغيت قد أذن الله عز وجل بأن تهزم وأن تعلق في هذا المكان نسأل الله عز وجل أن يتمم هذا النصر والتمكين لإخوانكم في الدولة الإسلامية.
So what you're seeing there, the beheadings are of Syrian soldiers loyal to Bashar al-Assad, done by ISIS. Now, of course, it's hard to tell who the good guys are and hard to tell who the bad guys are, which is part of the problem, and I suspect that's partly why the media isn't talking about this, because we like really obvious things, or seemingly obvious things. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says at least 85 government soldiers loyal to Assad died there. Right now, as we tape this, there is an ethnic group in Iraq called the Yazidi. They are trapped, about 50,000 of them are trapped in the mountains of Iraq, surrounded on all sides by ISIS. They are literally starving to death. Nobody's talking about it and nobody's doing anything. I don't know what we should do, but it seems like we should at least be talking about it. So let's talk about that. Why is nobody talking about this? I get what's going on in Israel and Gaza. Terrible. I get it. But why are we seemingly unable to discuss two things at once?
Because we're so busy talking about the Ebola virus that like we're not talking about this. I honestly don't know why people aren't talking about this. I mean, at this point in time, they now run 1/3 of Iraq. That is a large percentage of the country, and they're now going into Lebanon and Turkey, and they're, you know, this is
yesterday. They went into Lebanon yesterday.
This is a crisis, and nobody's talking about it, and I honestly don't know why.
Yeah, is this kind of the perfect, what this seems to me is that this is the perfect storm of George W. Bush fucked up everything by creating a war in Iraq that we shouldn't have had.
Yes.
And then sort of
Al-Qaeda started.
Yeah, and then Obama was sort of the perfect president of disengagement. That's what he said from beat one.
He didn't do the best job of that.
Well, no, I mean perfect in if you wanted a perfect storm of sort of terrible things to happen. I don't think it was his intent, but when he gave that big speech in Cairo, he sort of said, we're going to pull back and let you guys do stuff, and that's fine. But it's sort of the perfect storm of two presidents doing completely different things in a row to allow all this to happen.
Well, I mean, even more than that, there's an issue trying to force a governmental structure on a people who aren't interested or willing to receive it. Fundamentally, that's a problem. But beyond that, I think, going back to your original question, why is nobody paying attention to this? My cynical answer would be that neither of these groups are our allies.
Yeah.
And because neither of these groups are allies, we have no political reason to talk about this human rights crisis, and that's detrimental to, I think, our understanding. I mean, I am embarrassed to say that I'm sitting here and I know very little about the geopolitical conflicts that are happening in these areas, and that's mostly because I haven't done my due diligence, but
it's
also
hard
because
to
it's
do your
not,
yeah.
it's not there. You have to really dig for this. And when you talk about, we know what's going on in Israel with the West Bank, with Gaza. We know that because Israel is a huge political ally of the American government, and you're not going to see any kind of political figures in America speaking up for Gazans, for Palestinians. You're not, and I mean, what you believe about that, what you don't believe about that, it's a very tricky situation.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious where the allegiance of America lies in that scenario. In this scenario, what is it going to be with? Bashar? Is it going to be, I mean, like...
Right, like we sort of think it should be with the government in Iraq that we built, but we don't seem to be doing much for them.
And also, I think when something becomes so incredibly destabilized, how much is kind of putting all of your stock into a government that's losing control going to end up kind of cashing out in the long run?
Yeah.
And that's really, unfortunately, the way that the American government looks at these situations. They're strategic, individual people are head counts, and no fucking horrible pun intended here. But I think more than the political and more than the war that's happening there, what nobody's talking about is the fact that like people are dying in a very kind of
savage,
draconian way.
So is that then part of it, that this is so savage that partly, you know what I mean? Everyone keeps saying the images out of Gaza are horrible, which they are, but there's a definitive narrative. It's a bomb that drops on something.
It's a war that we recognize.
Yes.
And that's how we've seen war.
Yeah.
This is not that. This is savage. This is like...
It's like medieval.
Yeah, it is. It's medieval. It's something you would see on Game of Thrones. You have seen on Game of Thrones. Like, this is something we don't understand. Maybe that's another reason people aren't talking about it. It's like, how do you begin to talk about this? Where does this mentality come from?
Yeah.
How does somebody? I mean, Al-Qaeda has disavowed this group because of their behavior, because it's so savage. So like, how does someone become the person that beheads another human being and puts it on display for everyone to see? And why aren't we doing anything about it? I mean, it's a massacre.
Yeah.
Rwanda happened, other things have happened where there's been massacres, and yes, we waited and waited and waited, or we did not do anything about it, and maybe that was political, because there was no political, there was no incentive.
There's no currency for it.
There's no currency. Right. Now, look, there is a lot of oil at play, obviously,
Isn't there oil there?
especially in Iraq. I don't know what we're supposed to do, but this thing right now with the Yazidi in the mountains, they're literally dying of starvation.
Women and children,
This is an ethnic group that's existed in Iraq for thousands of years.
Yes.
I guess we could have some airstrikes on the ISIS soldiers that are around the mountains. You know what I mean? I'm not calling for more military intervention, but like, is there something we could do that wouldn't risk any American lives? Yeah, probably.
Or just, simple humanitarian aid. And I know that there's going to be pushback, that it's really hard to deliver humanitarian aid when there's military intervention on the other side, right? What you try to do. We've seen this happen all the time, or we've seen this happen historically in Africa, where we try to deliver humanitarian aid. Warlords will pick up the meal packages, whatever we're delivering, keep them from the people. The warlords are getting richer. It's complicated as fuck.
Yeah.
I think.
well said.
Yeah, I think this is my professional opinion. There's something to be said about a group of people that seems like they're behind the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mentality that's hard for us to sit with. Like, we should be past this.
Right.
Like, we're more modern than this. And when you see a group
the rest
of people,
of the world, it seems, is more modern than this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The rest of the world is more modern. This group is so behind, is so ass backward, that it's like you were saying, there's such a disconnect. How do you even begin to intervene? Because the arguments that you make, the diplomacy that you try to do doesn't translate. And that becomes a huge sticking point. I think that's where the real difficulty lies.
So final thought, is there anything that we should be doing, do you think?
I mean,
we're just letting it go to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah,
Is there anything?
I don't know. For me, I feel like, there's 50,000 people that are up on a hill now running away from these people. And I feel like at any point in time, I know it's complicated, but I feel like we're the United States. We can do anything we want to do. And, these people are just going to die if somebody doesn't help them. Yeah. And we've gone into their countries and we've, created havoc, and we haven't stabilized anything, as we can see, and then we just left. okay, well now we're just going to leave, and we're going to leave you to pick up the pieces of
Yeah,
this shit.
and that's
a huge problem.
That also goes to what I meant about the Bush-Obama
Yeah,
thing.
do we
It's
have a
like,
responsibility
we fucked it up so
here?
terribly. So do we have a responsibility?
I think so.
Even if we don't want to,
Yeah.
and we believe in the idea of disengaging, if we're the ones that screwed it up, do we at least 50,000 people on a mountain?
Drop some
So, yeah.
fucking MREs into the
That's what
town,
I'm-
you
yeah.
know?
Yes.
It's like, help the people
Do
eat,
something.
Do
Yeah.
something.
I don't know. I don't go into someone's house and make a mess and then be like, all right, I'm going to go home now and leave your kitchen in disarray. Like, I help someone clean up their kitchen and then I leave. But then again, I was raised with manners.
Unlike ISIS. Okay, now we
good
brought
button
it
there.
around. All right, from Ebola to ISIS to robots taking over. We haven't done a story on the robots in a couple weeks. Elon Musk, you know him. He created Tesla and SpaceX. He had some interesting tweets and some comments about how he fears robots more than he fears nuclear war. Let's look at a couple tweets. It's worth reading Superintelligence by Bostrom. We need to be super careful with AI, artificial intelligence, potentially more dangerous than nukes. Hope we're not just the biological bootloader for digital superintelligence. Unfortunately, that's increasingly possible. Now, the book he's talking about is called Superintelligence, Paths, Dangers, and Strategies by Nick Bostrom. And we've got an excerpt from the book. We cannot blithely assume that a superintelligence will necessarily share any of the final values stereotypically associated with wisdom and intellectual development in humans: scientific curiosity, benevolent concern for others, spiritual enlightenment and contemplation, renunciation of material acquisitiveness, a taste for refined culture or for the simple pleasures in life, humility and selflessness, and so forth. Now, if you've watched the other clips that we've posted from this episode, we went from Ebola to ISIS and all this other bad stuff in the world. I don't know how much of that, all that good stuff about humanity that he's talking about, we have going on in the world right now.
I know. I was just thinking, enlightened? We're enlightened?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
After the
really?
ISIS story,
Yeah,
it's
after
kind of...
ISIS, I mean,
It's all about
yeah.
context. It's
Yeah.
all about context.
Now, look,
Right.
Elon Musk obviously knows a lot about the future.
A lot.
This is a guy who's on the forefront of this, of getting us off this planet, and at least while we're on this planet, maybe using some electric cars before we destroy the whole freaking thing. How much credence do you give his tweets and this idea that the robots are going to get us before the nuclear war?
First of all, I never say never to anything. Never or always.
Yeah.
It's just one of those, I do not put it past anyone to create some kind of robot.
Yeah.
But why would you want to do that? I just don't understand why you would want to create something that's smarter than you.
Right. Well, isn't it more that we're just going to lose control of them? If you any of these scientific sci-fi movies, like it's all that we try to do something good, but then of course they end up taking over.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Look at Terminator.
conversations. There's a lot of conversations in these articles about like a benevolent robot, a robot that
Yeah.
is kind of tasked with protecting the humans. And okay, let's think of a worst case scenario. To protect a human is to protect a human from harming another human. Well, maybe the best way to protect them from harming each other is
Is
to
to
lock
kill
them
them.
all into cages
Well,
or to kill them or
which
whatever.
that was iRobot, which
Yeah.
you can either read the book or you can see the Will Smith movie. But that was exactly what happened. The robots turned because they realized that we were killing each other. So then they turned on us.
My problem with these kinds of arguments, and yes, I would argue that Elon Musk is a futurist. I would argue that he has some very good ideas about how human society can and could move towards the future. Elon Musk, though, is not a philosopher. Elon Musk is actually not a scientist. He's a very rich man who hires a lot of very smart people to do things that he thinks are good things to do. And most of the time, those are very good things to do. But let's not, put him on a really big pedestal. Second to that, I think that this entire conversation is predicated on the idea that artificial intelligence is capable of what you're talking about. Many scientists don't think that's the case. We have futurists like Ray Kurzweil or Michio Kaku who think there's going to be a singularity, we're going to be downloaded into the internet and we're not going to need our physical bodies anymore and all that
I
bullshit.
saw The Matrix.
Yeah,
I know.
a lot of neuroscientists and a lot of computational neuroscientists, computer engineers who work in that field are very skeptical that we will ever get AI to this place we know we have the computing power. We don't understand enough about how the brain works to be able to build a computer that could mimic actual human brain activity.
Right. So that is an interesting point, and that brings me to my next question: is do you think we've already started this? So in other words, we have the technology, and we're all walking around with this stuff in our hand, right? We've all got an iPhone, and we're all doing this stuff all day long. So the technology part is there, and then the other part, the intelligence part, is just us. It's our brains that we're constantly putting into it all day long with our Twitter and Instagram and all that. So we're becoming the machines ourselves, right?
Well, yeah. Well, the brain's kind of a computer that way. You know, neurons fire in a certain direction, and like we're already wired for that in a big way. You know, we just, yes, we understand, most of us, right or wrong, and we're emotionally intelligent in that way. I just go back to like, why? I mean, just why? Like, why? I mean, like, spiders and ants aren't walking around being like, oh, I wish, humans were made so they can crush us and they can step on us and destroy us like one day. I don't understand the
That's interesting. So do you think humans fundamentally have some desire to destroy ourselves? Like we love Godzilla movies and we love destruction movies. Is there some weird thing about being human?
I think there is some weird psyche. It's like, because we do sit on the top of the food pyramid, so to speak, it's like there is some fascination with creating something that is bigger than us. I mean, we're already fascinated with God and the idea of God and the idea of the bigness, that there is something bigger than us. Like, why not create that?
Right. Wait, Kara, real quick, does God exist, yes or no?
No.
Okay. Sorry, continue.
I think the issue here, well, first of all, I have to say the brain and the computer do not work the same way. Fundamentally, they don't work the same way, and that's something we have to understand. It's hard to understand that because the media tells us that they work the same way because it's easy to use analogies like, just like in a computer, your brain does this, but it's bullshit. There are a lot of people who try to model computers after the human brain, and they've been very successful in making computers smarter and faster and better.
What is the fundamental difference between like the brain and like the computer and how they're wired?
So when we talk about, and this, you might even want to cut this out. We'll see. I'm going to try and keep it short. But I can tell you just from personal experience, and granted this was, almost 10 years ago maybe now. When I was in graduate school, I was working in a neuroscience lab where we took mouse neurons. We took the brain cells and we put them on these little plates, and we could calculate all the different ways that they fired. And I was working with a physicist who's now at Los Alamos, and he was doing computational neurophysiology, where he would literally look at 3 neurons in a row, and he would look at types of networks and say, if this one fires and this one fires, how does this one react? If this one fires and this one fires, how does this one? That's 3 neurons. You have billions of these things in your brain. It's the capabilities of the brain are so far beyond the computational power that we understand right now. Computers are fast.
Right.
They can hold a lot of data, but the reasoning abilities that computers have are nowhere near the reasoning abilities that the human brain has been able to have. And fundamentally,
so that's why they can beat us in Jeopardy, but they can't love.
Exactly. And also I've got to make this point. Yeah. We still don't know in the neurosciences how consciousness arises. The concept of self. How does it go from individual neurons to being awake and alert and aware? And until we understand that, which is kind of the holy grail of neuroscience, I have absolutely no fear that a computer is going to become self-aware and take over.
Yeah.
That's great.
Final thought, how long till we have human-robot marriage?
They're already having sex, right?
Well, now there are sex robots, so it's going to happen, right?
Donald Trump said 2030, so I'm going with that.
There you go. All right, let's get off the serious stuff for a little bit and talk about party schools. The Princeton Review, they released their top 10 party schools, and this is based on a survey of about 130,000 students at 379 schools. Let's look at the results. Syracuse University, #1, University of Iowa, University of California at Santa Barbara, West Virginia University, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Lehigh University, Penn State, University of Wisconsin at Madison, Bucknell, and University of Florida. These are the big party schools. That's where everybody's doing the drinking, and what else are the kids doing now?
Smoking
the stuff, the marijuana.
They're doing the Molly.
And the Molly.
Oh, Molly.
Yeah, that's right.
We just had weed in my college days.
Yeah. No, he just didn't know about all the other
I didn't know. I was so stoned, I did not even find out about the other stuff. So I love things like this because, first off, obviously it's somewhat selective and anecdotal, of course. I don't know that we can really rank them in any real way. But what do you think's going on over at Syracuse? What's happening up there? It's northern New York. It's upstate New York.
Right.
There's
It's
not
really
a lot to
cold.
do.
Yeah,
It's
it's
cold.
You need some body heat, maybe.
Yeah.
That's part of
I
it.
went to Binghamton University. It was about 45 minutes away. It was not a huge party school. Again, that was why I was smoking all the weed, because there wasn't that much to do.
Was it because the population, like how big was the school itself?
Binghamton's about 12,000 at the time. Syracuse is closer to
enough,
like
yeah.
40,000.
That's enough to party. 12,000.
I just had this bong. I had this great bong.
different
What do you think?
Everyone was partying at his school.
Yeah, they
He just
were.
had no clue.
I had no idea. I was literally
He
getting
didn't leave
stoned.
the
And
house.
I was getting stoned and watching CNN, which is what led me to
having a-
doing what
And
I
look
do
at
now.
where you are now.
It's a personal
Exactly,
party.
right.
It's
Yeah,
a Dave
well,
Rubin
show.
party.
I used to see things in Wolf Blitzer's beard. All right, but that's a whole.
I don't know. University of Georgia, actually. I'm from Georgia
Yeah.
and a huge UGA fan. And my brother was at UGA when they were deemed like the #1 party school in the country. And of course, UGA was very unhappy with that. So they started sending out vans and just raiding bars all throughout the downtown and just going in and putting like anywhere between like 20 and 30 kids in vans and taking them to the police
Paddy
station.
wagons.
All like,
I mean-
yeah,
Paddy
just
wagons.
loading,
God,
hauling it up,
prohibition.
like, yeah, so people at Syracuse, like, beware. I mean, maybe that's what happens
They're
in the
coming
South.
for you.
Yeah.
Well, Syracuse did already, I think, put out a statement that was like, we do not strive to be a party school. That is
Yeah.
not, we are, academics are first. So
Yeah.
it's like, this is almost the list you don't want to be on, because
Yeah.
then administration's going to crack down and your life
I
is
like
going to be
bars.
miserable.
Like
So
best classroom experience.
Yeah.
Like, that's the list you want to be
Right,
on.
so really you want to be on the list of like 11 through 20, because then nobody talks about you when you're getting
Exactly.
a lot of partying out.
Yeah.
Then you're good. How much of the college experience, though, is just that? Like
Just
the good
partying?
part of college, you know what I mean? That you need to get
I just
some of that
do
out
it.
when you're.
Just do it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, being an adult sucks so much sometimes.
That's-
like,
I was gonna get
it's
to that
so
over here.
You have so much responsibility, and then you get married, and then you have kids, and then it's really hard to drink. Like, because somebody has to get up at 6 a.m. with the baby. So I just get it. I told my brother before he went to college, I was like, sleep with as many women as you want to, drink as many beers as you want to, like, have a great time, because once you get out of college, the real world starts, and sometimes it is not fun.
I very vividly remember being in college, and all my relatives, every adult that I knew would be like, "This is the best time of your life," blah blah blah. Yes, it was great.
And you were like
but
stressed though. Like I was like stressed studying for exams. It's like the grass is
But you
always
went to
greener.
school for something like you went to school for something like really smart.
But
and
I
hard.
have to
Like-
admit, I Dave
Did you
partied in
drink?
school.
Oh, you did?
I don't drink now, and I
Yeah.
never have. But I did a lot of drugs.
Lot of drugs.
And so and I think
scientist.
Yeah, exactly. But I liked your advice, because honestly, I think that college is the time to just get laid a lot. Like wear a condom, but get laid.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's also good experience to get out there, experience other people. You can be free. It's kind of like socially acceptable, which is a bit weird. Like you don't want to do that in the workplace. Like you don't want to shit where you eat, but like you can totally shit where you go to college. Like you can, you know what I mean? Like get laid. Have fun. I was doing it. I was having fun, but it's like there's certain people that getting high is more fun than going to an kind of party.
Also,
Right.
to also make another point, a lot of these people that are going to colleges, some of them come from really small towns where it's like, like for me, I always said to my brother or my sister, like, my mom's a superintendent of a school system. My dad, they're part of a big family business there. Like, but just be polite while you're there. Like, don't get, wasted, embarrass yourself, and have everyone in town talk about it.
Right.
And there was that existed in all these small town communities. So when you go to college, there's an anonymity that happens. It's like nobody back home knows what I'm doing.
And it's awesome.
And
It's like
it's
the best
awesome.
part.
Yeah,
It's
so
absolutely.
why not?
And you get to
Do it.
start over. You get to make new friends. You get to be
Yeah.
whatever person you're trying to figure out who you are at that
Absolutely.
time. Try a new identity. Have fun with it.
Yeah, so this was a very pro-party segment,
Hells
which I
yeah.
pretty much think. So I will bring it to one serious thing at the end. We always do these stories about how expensive college is becoming. So in a weird, and then people that are college educated aren't getting good jobs even anymore. So is college sort of just making itself irrelevant because of all the partying in a weird way? Now do I sound like an old man?
I think
like it's becoming real expensive and they're just partying and they can't get the job. So
I mean, I think that it's a bit polar to say it's becoming irrelevant. I do have huge problems with how expensive it is. I think that there are huge overhauls we should make in the way that we fund colleges. I'm all for like a lot of European countries, you give service to your country and in exchange you get an education. I do think though it depends on what you're studying. I think there are certain majors that are incredibly necessary. Like there's certain things you can't do unless you go to college. Like you're not going to be good at
a doctor or a lawyer.
Yeah, or I mean really a lot of things. But there are things that you can be self-taught at. But I do think that the college experience is important for kind of personal growth, especially if you did come from a small town, especially if you did come from a place where your parents were overbearing, where you didn't have any individuality, where you couldn't kind of step out on your own and learn how to fail. That's, I think, for me, one of the most important parts about college is learning how to fail, pick yourself back up, keep going.
That's a great point. Yeah.
All right, they're a great point. We'll end it on a great point. Here we go. So we do a lot of stuff, obviously, on religious extremism around here, and there is no shortage of it. But I found this story that I thought was kind of interesting, showing possibly some of the benefits of religion. It turns out that Seventh-day Adventists live an average of 10 years longer than the average American life expectancy. Now, some of the places where people live the longest include Sardinia, Italy, Okinawa, Japan. Has a lot to do with diet over there, but also other things, spirituality and other lifestyle activities. But let's look at why the Adventists live longer. They eat a plant-based diet, which I'm told that's good for you. This doesn't mean that they don't eat meat, they just don't eat a lot of meat. They also take the idea of the Sabbath very seriously, so they're decompressing the stress. About 84% of healthcare dollars are spent because of bad food choices, inactivity, and unmanaged stress, and they have cultural ways of managing stress through their Sabbath. And then their social network reinforces the right behavior. So this is interesting because this is kind of the good part of religion that everybody sort of tosses away. And because there's so much crazy extremism, usually I think that's warranted. Kara, I'm going to let you start here as the resident
atheist.
The resident atheist. When you see something like this, can you acknowledge that there are some benefits to?
Oh, completely. I mean, this is not a new concept either in the literature that religion kind of improves health and religion improves measures of psychiatry and self-esteem and all of these things. Like people seem to be happier, healthier. Now, I don't think it has anything to do with religion per se. I think it has everything to do with the social structure that religion provides for people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, atheists, I think fundamental to being an atheist is that we're not organized, and so what you don't have are these support groups.
You should start the atheist organization.
There are
some, right?
But people don't go every Sunday, and they don't, and so.
Right.
But
because there's so much sitting and standing and everything. I feel
awful.
like atheists.
Yeah, but it's like a good workout for your abs.
It is.
Seventh-day Adventists are an interesting bunch. They're kind of, people call them the Old Testament Christians. So they're a bit like Jewishy Christians in some of their customs. And I think that a lot lot of those have to do with really, Jewish Christians.
So like Jews from Connecticut.
Yeah, exactly. or like Jews from Texas, maybe.
Okay.
So I grew up in Texas, other Southern girl. I knew I liked you. And I grew up Mormon.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested to see if Mormons have similar life expectancy, because in the same vein, Mormons don't drink. They don't drink caffeine. They are really involved in the social kind of stuff, and they're just healthy, family-oriented people. And of course, that's like the one thing I took away from it when I grew up in a Mormon household.
I also think there's something to be said about, like, I've thought a lot about, when you believe that there's this God and, he or she or whatever is in control of our life. Therefore, we don't have to ask the whys. We don't have to ponder the questions. We don't have to stress about, well, what if I did this? Is this going to happen in my life, in my career, in my this, in my that? And we are in we live in anxiety and fear over all of these questions. But if you just kind of are in a constant state of surrender, the stress doesn't exist. Like, I was even holding my newborn, he was fighting taking a nap so bad, this thing that was so good for him. And I'm like, why do you fight this thing? You fight me all the time. In the high chair, it's good for you to sit in the high chair and eat. You know, all these things, they're all good for you when you're fighting it. And I'm like, we do the same as adults. We fight constantly the flow. Life is happening and we're fighting against it. It's got to age us and cause so much stress in our lives. These people are not fighting the flow.
Yeah.
They're just living their lives in this very, you know, peaceful, I don't really have any, you know, concerns about life. I know I'm being taken care of. So of course that's gonna help you live longer.
So I like that. So how do we take that piece that I think the three of us all agree is a good piece? How do we take that flow piece, that peaceful piece, and then not necessarily directly connect it to religion, but to connect it to just sort of more evolved life?
A lot of people do that with mindfulness, like mindful meditation and some of the kind of concepts that they take out of more Eastern philosophies, not necessarily religions. But I do want to point out that there are also high levels of correlation between intelligence and depression. And so yes, there is something about constantly questioning and being scientific and thinking very hard that might cause some psychiatric imbalances in people, or vice versa. I mean, it's not causal here, it's a high correlation.
You're saying ignorance is bliss.
I'm saying ignorance is bliss, and I'd rather not be ignorant. I'd honestly rather know
Die
things.
10 years older. I mean,
younger.
Yeah.
I would. And so I think it's really about what is the goal here. I don't want to live that long in the dark. It's just not that interesting to me.
Well, you got to my last question, because would you sacrifice a couple years on your life to feel that your life was more enlightened rather than easy? This is a good one.
No, I think that you had a good point. I think there's a way to find that sanctity within your own skull, rather than having to like be a part of a religious sect. I think that you can, and that is the mindfulness practice, and being conscious and awakened. And it's just it's harder to do whenever, I guess, at a certain level of intelligence, when you're constantly questioning and asking the questions. And I'd rather ask the questions. I've been that way since I was a child. I'd rather just die 10 years earlier. I'm sorry, my son.
I'm with you, and
sorry,
actually,
son.
yeah, that's rough for the kid. But besides that, it's fine. I mean, I'm with both of them on this, and that's why we're doing this show, because I want to show you that there can be some level of intelligence and also some level of fun, and that not everything is just this terrible, awful thing that's going on constantly. Right? There's something.
Again,
bring us
it's
on.
not causal. I have to say, it's not. You can have both. It's possible to have both. I mean, just because you're smart doesn't mean you're going to die young. Like, I hope that's not what you take away from this.
I was at your house a couple of weeks ago. You were having a hell of a time in the middle of the day in the pool, and you're a smart person, so you can have fun. And
Lots
be
of fun.
smart at
That's
the
true.
exact same time. All right, one more for you. Forbes has come out with a list of the highest paid actors and actresses, and there's some really, really interesting stuff here. So let's take a look at the 5 highest paid actors and actresses. Okay, so number 1 for the women, Sandra Bullock. She pulled in $51 million last year. Jennifer Lawrence, $34 million. Jennifer Aniston, $31 million. That one kind of surprised me because she doesn't seem to be doing that much. Gwyneth Paltrow, $19 million. Angelina Jolie, $18 million. So the top 10 females added up to $226 million. We're just showing you the top 5 there. And then for the men, Robert Downey Jr., $75 million. Dwayne Johnson, I mean, I just saw G.I. Joe 2. Really? $52 million. Bradley Cooper, $46 million. Leonardo DiCaprio, $39 million. And Chris Hemsworth, $37 million, and the top 10 men added up to $419 million. So I'm going to start where you brought us, Nikki, before the show started. You brought up an interesting point about box office. You want to bring up that first, and then we'll go from there.
I'd be interested to know like what Sandra Bullock has brought in terms of box office numbers versus Robert Downey Jr.
Right.
Because if they're both relatively the same, and Sandra's still getting like half the amount of money that Robert Downey Jr. is getting, then that's really an imbalance. But if Robert Downey Jr. is bringing in twice as much to the box office than Sandra Bullock, then I look at that and I go, well, if he's bringing in $1 billion and she's bringing in half, then yeah, you should pay him more.
Right. So okay. So we don't know that specifically.
We don't know.
I think it's a great point.
Yeah.
But so just using the information we have, there still does seem to be an issue with.
Yeah, then
men.
screw the man.
Well,
Yeah. Come on, ladies, fight for your women here. What's
Even
going on?
if Robert Downey was pulling in twice the box office, I think the more fundamental problem is that the movies that are being written for leading men. And so, yes, he's going to be pulling in more box office if the scripts that are out there and available and the movies that are being funded are all movies where men are the leads.
Right.
And this is historic in Hollywood. Like, I worked in the sciences for a long time before I came into production, and I started working in front and behind the camera. And people talk about sexism in STEM all the time, right? Science, technology, engineering, math, and how women don't have the opportunities that men have, and how we're working really to push through the glass ceiling. And when I got to production, I thought it would be a relief. Oh my fucking God, it's almost worse. It's almost worse in Hollywood than it is in the sciences. Women don't have as many opportunities available to them. So if they don't have those opportunities, they're not going to be able to get the box office. And granted, we're talking about people like Sandra Bullock, who still made like what, $50 million. Like at a certain point, it's like I don't give a shit, right? But if we actually translated that down to the camera operators,
that's what I was
going
to say. Like to women who have a chance. I mean, I work on a show where finally this season we were able to get some female directors on the show.
Yeah.
But we had, besides the creator herself, we had not had any in 3 seasons female directors. And it's like, where are these women? They're out there, but they're not getting the same opportunities. DPs,
especially
ADs.
Camera, grip, gaff. Like, you just don't
Electric,
see women
right.
that often.
No, you really don't. So like that's where the big struggle is. I do think that
How much though is that women don't necessarily gravitate to those jobs? I mean, are there a lot of women that want to be doing camera work? Yeah.
Yes, they're actually.
I had a female jib operator on the last show. Like, I did a daily live show on Pivot for almost a year, and the jib, which is one of the hardest cameras to operate, it's really heavy. She was female. She was amazing. She obviously wanted to be in camera op. I just don't think. Also, I don't think that society says like that's a job you should have as a girl. Like as a girl, you should be in front of the camera,
or
you
wardrobe,
or wardrobe, makeup. Yes, because
makeup and wardrobe.
I can tell you, they're almost always women.
Yeah. For the record, our director Amira is a girl, and she's fantastic, doing a hell of a job right over there.
I will say, I do want to say that I do think it is changing in terms of female leads. You know, Hunger Games is a good example. Sandra Bullock in Gravity, Angelina Jolie in every action movie she's ever done. I think that it is changing. It is getting better. So that's something positive. I would like to know what the international value of those men are as opposed to the women, because that also could have something to do with it.
You mean with like endorsement deals?
Well, no, I mean in terms of like, does it box office internationally? Like, are people internationally more likely to go see a Robert Downey Jr. film than they are a Sandra Bullock film or a Jennifer Aniston film? You know, Dwayne Johnson, he's really big internationally. So
why? Why does he?
Because they like strong men.
Yeah, he's big and buff, and there's a lot of explosions. But that, I think, is part of it. That's a lot of this isn't all equal information, because if Robert Downey Jr. is in Iron Man, people love going to those movies. You know what I mean? Versus Gravity, which I absolutely loved.
But Gravity made a lot of money.
No, and Gravity did really well. But it was
let's be real.
It was a slow burn.
You're right. Let's
so you have to look at the whole.
Let's look at all the action heroes out there. We have to put. I mean, it's newsworthy when there's a female action hero, a comic hero, and okay, now we're going to make a movie about that. But like, most of them are men.
I mean, just right now, you can look at every billboard here in Los Angeles for Expendables 3. There's about 87 men.
And one
is there a woman?
There's one woman.
Oh, there is one woman.
I think it's Adrian. I forget her name. She was actually, they did a Wonder Woman pilot, and that failed and tanked. But I think it's her that's in that. But I was looking at it. It's on a huge building on Sunset Boulevard. I was like, oh, look at all those men and one woman.
That's hilarious, because I've seen it.
So maybe that's what we're talking about.
I mean, I've seen that probably 50 times, and every time I'm looking, is there a woman? Is there a woman? Is there? How did also Kelsey Grammer? How did he become an action star?
He's an action star?
Well, somehow he's in it, so I don't know how that happened. All right, last thought on this, just the numbers. You know, we say these numbers, 50 million, 75 million, blah, 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 like it's nothing. Like, these people are literally making more than we all make, like,
ever in our whole lives?
Yeah. I don't know which way I was going to go with that. But
they should.
Should they?
As an actress, tell me why. Tell me why they should.
Okay, because we make those
Someone wants
companies
a SAG award.
very,
Come on.
very rich.
Yeah.
We make those companies very, very wealthy.
Yeah.
And it's Sandra Bullock. Sandra Bullock is selling that movie. People are going to see it because she is in it.
Yeah.
You know? So she should get paid a lot of money, because if you knew the kind of money that they are making on the other end, you'd be like, oh, well then yeah, she should be making that amount of money for carrying a movie and making it sell.
Right, but is there a point
That's a
where
good point.
is there a point where they price themselves out? Because I went to see Planet of the Apes last week, and literally a popcorn and a soda was more than the ticket. You know what I mean? Like, is the rest of that where people are eventually going to be like, you know what, I'm just not going to go
Well, I
and
like
spend
that we're
50
seeing
bucks.
that. I mean, because I do think that we've got our priorities a bit unbalanced in this country, and I do think that it's a bit weird that Sandra Bullock makes $50 million in a year, but we do that. We make that decision.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing with professional athletes. Like, they make so much money. It's insane how much. And then
Right.
you've got, you know, obviously here
First
comes like the
responders
fucking
and-
like PBS, you know, like here comes the NPR like socialist over here. But like, yeah, exactly. First responders, teachers, you know, whatever, like they don't make nearly the same kind of money. I think you're right. Sandra Bullock deserves that given the current landscape. I think the current landscape is weird. And I do think it's kind of cool that we're starting to see that change. You're starting to see the rise of the YouTube star. You're starting to see the rise of the individual self-made person.
It's shifting. It really, really, really is shifting, where people can make a web series and own their own content, and that is power now.
And they can
You
actually
know?
live off of it. Like, it is not
Yeah.
all over LA. We're seeing these like co-op kind of places pop up where there are these writing studios and these kind of where people own their own business, but they don't want to buy a whole storefront and they don't want to work in an apartment, so they pay like $200 to be a part of this group, and they can go have a desk. And the reason that is happening is because so many people are making it. They're actually making enough
Yeah.
money to get by on their own as an entity.
I
That's
guess
cool.
I guess for me, I think, you know, I you have to look at it in the context. If you're making a movie that's going to gross $500 million or whatever it is, and you're the face of that, yes, you should get a large percentage of that. But if you're making an indie film and you have no idea what it's going to make, you know, and you just want to do it, it's a great script and you want to do it, you get scale and you show up and you do your job, or $100 a day, and then you say, hey, I'll take 2 percentage points of the back end if this thing ends up doing really well, because yeah, I gave you my face, I did my time, but you don't have to pay me up front. I think that it is in the context. What movie are you making? What is going to be the box office? And if you keep bringing the money in, you should get paid.
And that's what being an artist is all about, right? You do some stuff for money and you do some stuff for passion.
And that's also
So,
a really
bring
good
us on.
point. I know I gotta keep it short, but
Yeah.
like the other day I was talking online about how I want to get an electric car, and I was asking for advice, and every response was get a Tesla Model S. And I was like, I feel like I shouldn't have to point this out, but I can't fucking afford a Tesla Model S. And I literally got responses from people like, you're on TV and you can't afford that car.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just think that what ends up happening is that Sandra Bullock makes $50 million, and so people go, anybody who I've ever seen in front of the screen is rich.
Yeah.
And what they don't understand is, in a movie like that, 2 people get top billing. They might make $5 million each, and then everybody underneath it makes like $800 a day.
And can I
Yeah.
also
Yes.
point out at one last point? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I
I'm
like how
fired
the
up.
defensive
I'm fired
happens.
up.
Yeah.
Because also all of our money goes away. We get paid $10,000 and we get $1,000 of it because there's taxes, okay, and then
Which is
on
like
top-
half.
which is
Yeah.
like half, because they think that you make that year round and you don't.
You make it
you
like
do a project
1
for
week.
1
Yeah.
week, and they're like, oh, you make that all year, so we're gonna take half of your money, and then outside of that, you have to pay a lawyer, and you have to pay an agent, and you have to pay a manager. Then if you're on a show like me, you have to pay a publicist, and then you have to pay a stylist.
But your publicist showed up, so
Yeah,
that's pretty
so
good.
she-
So we know she's working at least.
She's like,
So like, she's like, stop talking. And so I'm just saying, like, the amount of money that we have to dish out to actually just do our job is insane.
all that being said,
I want $50 million.
all that being said, we're still very lucky to be able to have a creative job where we have a creative
we
outlet,
love.
a job we love,
Yes.
where I can at least make rent.
Yeah,
Like,
and
to
look-
me, it's
And
like I
save
make
up.
rent and I'm about to pay $199 a month for a lease on a new electric car, and I'm very happy that I can afford
So
to
you're
do
getting a
that.
Prius.
I'm getting, I think, a Chevy Spark. And it's so cute.
And the Spark, that's the new electric one.
It's very cute.
That
John
the Volt
Iadarola
and-
drives one.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I don't know if you're a regular TYT viewer.
For the record, I do want to just say I actually am in the 1%. It's the other 1%, but it's the wrong 1% the other way. I'm closer. I'm actually closer to that 1% certainly than the other 1%.
But you wear it well.
H&M, man. H&M. All right, I'm going to let you guys pimp yourselves out for the good people. Kara, right over there.
All right. KaraSantamaria.com. That's where you can find all my stuff. I do a weekly podcast called Talk Nerdy, a cool science podcast, downloaded every week on Mondays from iTunes and Stitcher. You can also see the work that I do locally in Southern California on SoCal Connected on KCET, and internationally now on Techno on Al Jazeera America.
Well, well, well. Nikki, give us your best actress saleswoman pitch right there.
I cannot top that. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't get paid $50 million. No, you could just follow me on Twitter at Nikki DeLoach and on Instagram at Nick, N-I-K, DeLoach.
All right, there you go. Thank you guys for watching. Comment, like. What else do they do?
I don't know.
Subscribe.
Subscribe, obviously. That's
the most
big
important one.
That's the most important. Man, you really do clean up all my facts. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll do this again next week.